earlier, I stated that in SQL injection, special characters are included. Special characters are single quotes, double quotes, hash, SQL keywords like or, and so on. And other special characters include semicolon, equal, and so on. So what are those special characters? Special characters are characters that have syntactic meaning to the SQL interpreter. Syntactic meaning means when SQL interpreter sees such special characters, it will think that this is part of the SQL query syntax. So the idea is that by injecting such special characters, the attacker is trying to change the original SQL syntax, which is not intended by the developer. So the attacker would include such special characters in places like login form and URL, the query component of the URL. If the attacker knows that in such places, the input included in such places will be used as part of the SQL query. And by injecting such special characters, the attacker is trying to change the original syntax of the SQL query and hopefully get some kind of sensitive information or do something more malicious. Let me explain about the attack using a concrete example. So assume that this is a login server program used in metadata web application that you saw in my demonstration earlier in Kali Linux machine. Assume that this is a login server program which processes the user input and password information, username and password information. And when the user enters the username and password information and enter the URL, assume that it results in a HTTP request like this. Part of the URL contains the user and password information, the query component. And in this PHP program, when this program receives this HTTP request, it will firstly access the user parameter contained in the HTTP request and also the password parameter contained in HTTP request. So this is a PHP code for performing such operation. And next, the PHP program constructs SQL query by using those user inputs. And this is a select query, selecting the records in accounts table which match these conditions. Whether this username exists in the database with the correct password. If such a user exists, it will return a result when the query is executed by the MySQL database. So this is a place where the query is sent to the MySQL database by this PHP program. And the query itself is executed inside the database, and the database will return the result back to this PHP program. So the result may look something like this: the username, password, and the role, which are recorded in the database. But of course, if your credentials are not valid, it will not return any value. It may just return a null value. And here, the program checks whether there is a result sent back by the database. If there's a result, the program will assume that the user credentials are valid, and then the user will be logged in with the role recorded in the database. So this is assume that this is how the login program looks like in that multi-data application. So let's look at a valid example first. Assume that you provide a value called John for the username and the password code. So what will happen is in the SQL query, when this username and password are substituted in place of the variable, it will result in something like this. And then when this query is executed in the database, it will check whether there is such a username called John. Assume that there is such a username John, and then it will check whether the password is valid. But since I do not have the correct password, it will be that the password is invalid, and then there will be no result returned. And then I will not be able to log in as a user. So this is the attack that was not successful. And let's look at the next attack. So instead of just this value, now assume that I provide something like this. Quotes or 1 equal to 1. Space hash. And here you can provide any value, doesn't have to be anything specific. So let me just say ABC. So let's look at what happened to this SQL query now. Look at this. So now in place of username, the value become quotes or 1 equal to 1 and hash. And password is ABC. Take note that this is a value that is submitted by the user exactly here. And this is a value that is submitted by the user here. Right? So what happened to the SQL query now? Originally, the SQL query, in this SQL query, in the where condition, there is only an and, whether this username is valid or password is valid. But now let's look at the query syntax. There is one additional condition here, or. So what happened is, when the MySQL database execute this query, it will check 3 different conditions, whether the username valid or whether this condition is valid and password valid. Because now there are 3 conditions, all right? So it will first check whether the username valid, because the value that I provided here is only a code. There is no such username, so it will return, it will evaluate to false. For this condition, it will evaluate to true, obviously, because 1 equal to 1, which is true. And the last one, in fact, this last condition will not be evaluated at all. It won't get evaluated by my SQL interpreter. The question is why? Why? Because of the use of hash character. Again, this is a special character. Special character for the interpreter. For the interpreter, it means comment. It means a comment. So it means anything after this comment will not be interpreted by the interpreter at all. So it will only evaluate the first condition, the username valid, which will evaluate to false, or whether this condition is valid. So what happened is the result of the SQL query is where false or true. So since this is a Boolean OR operation, the overall result will be true. False or true will result in overall result true. That means as far as the MySQL interpreter is concerned, any of the records stored in the database that evaluate to true condition will be returned as a result. That means every record in the database will be returned as a result to this PHP program. So this result will contain, in fact, all the records that are stored in the database. Let me repeat. When this SQL query is executed, any record for which these conditions evaluated true will be returned as a result. And since this condition will always result in true, because false or true, it means true, right? So every record will get returned from the database and sent it to this login program. And when this program checks whether there is a result, it means there is a result, and then it will fetch the row of the very first record from the database, from this result. And then the user will be logged in at that particular row, assuming that the row is the very first record in the database is admin, and then the user will be able to log in as an admin. And that is SQL injection attack. So essentially, by including such special characters, the attacker was able to change the original query syntax, because originally the query syntax was only like this. Supposed to be only like this, where there is one condition check and there's another condition check. But by including such special characters, the syntax of this SQL query changed by having one additional condition, which is an or. So that attack was only about obtaining sensitive information from the database. There could also be more damaging attack, like deleting the table accounts or selecting some other information from different tables and so on, by using a similar SQL injection. Lastly, take note that different kind of special characters may also be needed for different kind of SQL queries. In my earlier example, I was only talking about SQL select queries for obtaining data. But if you have other kind of SQL query like inserting into the account or deleting, updating, and so on, and in such cases, you might have to use different set of special characters. For example, here, insert queries, you are trying to insert a new record into the accounts table. So the SQL query might look something like this. And in this case, you cannot really apply the or syntax because it will not make any sense to the SQL interpreter. It will simply result in the error or the exception by including something like code space or equal to or space 1 equal to 1. And in such cases, you might have to use something like this. So in place of the user, in user input, you might want to include something like this character. And then you add additional SQL query syntax like drop table accounts. And then hash. So that this part is still a valid, it may still be valid SQL query. And then if this one has been executed, after this query has been executed, the next SQL query will be drop table accounts, which will delete this account table. And then the rest will not be interpreted because this is the comment SQL character. So recap, in SQL injection, special characters are used to conduct. And depends on the kind of SQL query that you have, you might have to use different set of special characters. And once SQL injection attack is successful, there are many things that you can do, not only obtaining sensitive information, you can also do deleting the databases, tables, even injecting remote shells and to control the systems and so on. But we want to go that deep into that. But take note that these are all many kinds of attacks that you can do with SQL injection. And that's it regarding with SQL injection attack. In my next mini lecture, I will talk about defending such SQL injection attack. Stay tuned.